We have a transition team in place that is includes building representative nurses, those types of things. Part of the transition, I want to hear from parents as well, and this is a good opportunity to hear some things. We've looked at all types of plans, and I think most of you know that we sent out a survey to parents just to get a perspective. That survey provides some valuable information. For example, it'll tell us maybe how many people will opt out of riding a bus, and that's a huge factor in planning. We also ask questions related to cleaning and masks, etc. In the transition teams, the district transition and then the building transition teams, which scale down from the district. I also have meetings with athletic director, nurses, maintenance, technology. So those are all helpful in how we would do things. Some of the areas that we've discussed and some of the areas that are most difficult, obviously by following the social distancing planning, you have to come up with some type of plan where you can space kids out. Smaller kids are smaller. It makes it a little bit easier at the elementary level than probably the high school level, because high school level kids, they change classes all the time. So that makes it difficult. Cafeteria is another area that do you eat in the classroom? Do you eat in the cafeteria? That kind of thing. So today's focus is elementary, and Mr. Andrews has been working hard to figure out ways when students are there to eat in the cafeteria in different shifts and or classrooms and or other areas. We've talked about masks, and we know that for an elementary student, a mask would be so difficult to have a student wear all the time, obviously, especially if you're in younger grades. One of the things I think is important, though, in this whole process is that we decide when students, so they learn how to deal with this and they're not scared of situations. So, for example, if they go out with their mom or dad and they're wearing a mask, it's important that we educate students, I think, in elementary school. So whether if it's a first grade classroom, we say, let's practice using a mask as we go to the cafeteria. That's something we can talk about and see if we would find that feasible to do. Two major areas that are still very big points for me that are most difficult. One are restrooms, and dealing with the restrooms in a manner that you don't get too many people in a restroom. I don't know how many times throughout education, career teachers and administrators will all tell you the same thing. There's too many people in the restroom. So that's something we have to work out and come up with a plan for that. And then the big one, which really I'm very disappointed in the state from the perspective of not understanding, I think that's Mr. Maine putting something up there, not understanding the effects of...
It's actually not. I'm going to go ahead and...
Yeah, take that off. I don't know who is that, or maybe they hit their button by mistake.
Probably.
Yeah. What is an area that is very concerning to me is air conditioning. If you do the research, they don't sound like they have an answer. We've asked Honeywell, who's a major corporation. They don't necessarily have the answer yet about how, if air conditioning transfers the virus quicker. A lot has to do with ventilation. So you may have a situation where you have a room where air conditioning is probably needed, because some students are really affected by it, but you may have to open a window while you run that air conditioning. If you look at there was a Wuhan study, and it was, showing people that got the virus through air conditioning being passed along inside, but they're still in debate. This is one of the things that was kind of ironic. Yesterday, I heard they were talking about one of the reasons why some of the numbers may be going up in Florida and or Arizona is because of the fact that young adults are going out and they're fine on the beach, but when they go inside after in an environment that there's a lot of people. So that's just something that we're trying to get more research on. So I think that's one of the things that I want parents to know before they make a decision later on how they're going to send their student or keep their student at home or whether we're going to have air conditioning. Many people here grew up, they didn't have air conditioning at any time in 12 years of schooling, so it's not going to be a factor. Others, some kids are just used to that. So those are some of the areas, but I don't want to just talk the whole time. I want to hear some of your concerns and or comments and or questions. So we have some board members here. We have with the business manager. You want to ask about your checkbook, he'll gladly take you to the side. Or ask about Wilmington, something with finances, we'll do that. But I'm sure everybody has some concerns. So if you want to bring it up, don't be shy. No question is too dumb, as they say. Any question is good as far as I'm concerned. Somebody get me started. Miss Sarver, why don't you get me started? Mrs. Taylor, go ahead. You put your hand up. Go ahead.
What are we thinking? And I know things are changing daily. What are the chances that the students are going to go back 100% in person? I know that there are a lot of schools are talking about a lot of different hybrid options, and I'm sure that we are too. But what are the chances that they're going to go back 100%
in person? Yeah. Okay. That's a good question. That's a good question. We did not practice that. That's a good way to start. So we have some factors that we have to look at. And number one, it's not a factor related to the pandemic, just so everybody knows this ahead of time, is we have a Windows project. The Windows project was brought along because the Windows were in disrepair for quite a while. So the board approved that, and now we're waiting on changing the Windows, and that'll happen here in July. They can probably change them pretty fast, but obviously we want the Windows so we can open the Windows when students are there. So that's just something I want everybody to know ahead of time. That's probably not going to be a factor, but I want everybody to know if we had to say, hey, we're going to start a week later as far as going to school, we would do that if we needed to, just based on the fact we need Windows open, because that's a health issue. I believe that when I've talked to people that, and these are students involved, staff involved, teachers, etc., that I think it's imperative that we start in different phases. So what I mean by that is students would go back in a way that we educate them. So one of the areas we talked about is the first week you might have one group of students come in based on grade level and or location. And they come in and they talk to the teacher, they meet the teacher, they learn, they understand, because it's almost like every student K to 12 is going to be faced with going to kindergarten again. That's number one. Number two, once we get that established, to have social distancing in school is very difficult to learn how to do that, because I've noticed myself, and I think all of you, is when you get around other people, you gravitate toward them, and little kids are going to do that more than anything. So that's one way that we want to do, is educate them how to deal with other kids in a way that is positive. Not saying, they're not going to get yelled at because they're next to somebody, obviously, but trying to teach them how we do this and why are we doing this. So we don't, whatever we do, because elementary teachers are good at that kind of thing. So one plan is to look at going, 1 week on, 1 week off with two different groups. So if your kids were in group A, they would go week 1. And then if they were in group B, they would be simultaneously at home on the internet. Now, one of the things we presented the other day to the teachers was a way to improve their teaching using things like document cameras, that type of thing, so they can, show books, they can show videos, whatever, a lot of things. We're getting a tool for each particular person. I think if you start out that way, you teach at the beginning, then you can migrate toward, as long as you're in the green, as long as things are going better, you could migrate toward a full 100% exposure. And when I say exposure, I just mean exposure to the atmosphere, to the people there. I think another factor that we have to consider as educators and parents and everyone else is There is a psychological factor to this that is difficult, because people are thinking, it's easy when you're at home and you say, hey, I want to go. I know everybody wants to go back to school. But when you're there and then you're in that process all the time, it kind of changes things for students and parents. Now, that being stated, and this will help with other questions, we will have 3 options as far as for teachers or for parents to select. One will be the option that you could have your student at home in an asynchronous or anytime option. So you would go, they could go online, they could work on the computer, they could do things. Maybe that fits you better. Maybe in the morning you work and you can't have your student interact with our teachers. So you're thinking an asynchronous option is best. So that's fine. Another one is a synchronous option where you stay at home. So what that would be is similar to what I said with the A and the B groups, would be that you would just stay at home, but you would be part of that class. So in other words, Mrs. Smith is teaching a class, and she's teaching the main areas of math, English, science, etc. And I'm part of that class, and I'm going to watch that class from home, and I'm going to do things with that class. And we really enhanced it. They have a mobile thing that they can move it around the classroom. They can show kids in the classroom, etc. And you can choose to do that. And then the third option, obviously, is the traditional, meaning that you are part of the class. And whatever the regulations are, whether it's hybrid, whether it's 100%, or whether it's red, you would be at home. Under the red guidelines, by the way, the state has told us that we can't send anybody to school. One of the other flexibilities in going week to week is that you can change things to widen out the circumstances. And what I mean by that is if you have a student who is in a group and then they're sick, certainly if we have a case of COVID with a student, it's going to create some sense of panic and that type of thing, I would think. So you could also expand that to where you could put a week in between kids coming in. Like you go A group, week off, B group. But you also can go the other way where you go A group, B group, and then we change into everybody's there. So I think the flexibility is paramount because of what we're facing. And one of the other difficulties in our situation is that we have 2 counties. So we have to go by whatever the least county is. Even though our school is in Lawrence County, we have to consider Mercer County as well, because a ton of kids come from Mercer County. So those are some of the things. So this, Taylor, good question. I hope I answered a little bit of that. I wouldn't say that starting off right away will be 100%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if you're doing 1 week on and 1 week off,
Yeah.
I guess 2 questions here. What happens in that week off? I'm assuming they'll just be assignments, kind of the same.
No. They would that week off. Yeah, good question. That week off. Go ahead. Yeah,
the other question I have real quick is, if we're doing that, are there different teachers for each of those groups, or there's the same teacher interacting with all those students anyway?
Yeah, good question. Let me explain that better. So if you're on the week on, week off situation, if we decide to do that, if you take, we'll say a teacher, Mrs. Smith, we don't have a Mrs. Smith, but if we have in 2nd grade. So Mrs. Smith is teaching 2nd grade. What she's going to do is half the kids are going to come into her class on week A. And then half the kids are going to come into her class on week B. While she is with week A, while they're in class, the week B students will be online with their class. So they'll report at 8:30 or whatever time we tell everybody we're going to report. And they go on and they're watching the class, and they can interact directly with the teacher and their classmates. So she could be saying, well, Johnny, you're here. What do you think of this answer? And Johnny says this. Or we say, Johnny, go to the board, because we can do that now. We can send the student to the board. They're working on the math problem, and they're saying at home, do the same thing. And they do the same thing. And then you say, well, Bobby, what did you get by that answer? So you're interacting, you're just at home, because the way this does is it creates the social distancing. But for that time at home, you're just as part of the class as anybody else. Now, during lunch, and or recess or something like that, or whatever we call recess, you would not be in on the class that time per se unless we develop it. But you would be there for the main parts of the class. You would interact with your other students because we want to develop that. Still, they know who's in their class. And then if we go back 100% within a relative good time frame, then they would be part of that class. So they'll be on there all the time. You'll have interaction with the teacher, when you're not there as well, in a live format. Does that answer? Did I make that clear? I hope I did.
To piggyback off of that, when
Yes.
you have, some of us have multiple, I'm assuming most of us have multiple children. So would all of our children be going on week A and then they would only be home with us for week B, or is it going to be alternating based on what grade?
I think that when we looked at that, we already have we went through the ALMA system and we looked at that. I think, well, let me ask you, what would be more helpful to you? Would it be to have the same weeks or alternating weeks?
I teach cyber school, so I'm home every day anyway. So it really doesn't make a difference to me. But, for parents that are working outside the home, it might be a big deal.
I think it's a big deal if you have an older student who can watch a child that's younger. So we would try to do that, put them on the same weeks. So they would both be in school, and then they would be able, you would switch that over. But I'm not saying that's the total plan yet, but, we're looking at that. In order to keep social distancing. One way, if you look at the recommendations we've been provided by various groups, some people say 3 feet, some people say 6 feet. We're getting a lot of different input, just to be honest with everybody. But it's also, another area is the bus ride. I think we sent out our survey and we looked at some of that, about 600 responses, and I think 60% or so are going to decline using the bus. Well, that's helpful as far as spacing the bus out. If you look at what they say you should wear a mask on a bus. That provides the ability to have more students on a bus. So that's a factor. That doesn't mean we'll do that, but if you're going to not require a mask, then you can probably put less kids on the bus. And I guess the difficulty for the staff administration is that, we all want to go back full force, but you also want to err on the side of caution. So sometimes you want to see, if you have a situation, how do you handle that? And I think it's easier to teach people at the beginning and then transition into 100% if that's possible. Thank you, Mrs. Rock. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am, certainly.
Hello. I am actually a professor at Slippery Rock University, and my daughter will be going in 6th. And
God bless you, because my wife's a professor at Slippery Rock, so God bless you.
Yeah. So yeah, we're doing our own planning, right?
Oh, no, yeah. That's a whole nother.
You probably already know this. So I'm in the physician assistant area. So we actually do have exceptions to the 6 rule, which may mean that I have to quarantine for 14 days if a student comes up with COVID-19. So I'm wondering, can our students then at your school transition from going to class? And if she had to switch to asynchronous, because I assume you would want me to quarantine her too. Does that make sense?
Yes. Good question, Mr. Rice. I think that's a good point and why we're making it so flexible. And the other thing is we're able to make it flexible because of our technology. So a lot of schools that may be deciding right away we have to go 100%, it's because they really didn't, we've done some good things in the teaching, but now we're going to even expand it even more. So it gives us that ability to do that. So that definitely would be a factor, that if you were in your job asked to quarantine, obviously it would be best if your child would quarantine, but they could be at home in the hybrid situation. And then when that quarantine's over, then they can come back with their group and or the 100% group.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're going to give the options here. It's tough. The toughest part is to probably go asynchronous back to synchronous. So if you're going online, you get our teachers to correct work and or do some other things if you're online away from your class teacher. But that would be consistent for you if you want to do that. For some circumstances that fits. The majority of people want the flexibility to be there and not be there. Another plan that people have looked at from a perspective of having their children go and see the teacher each week is a 2-1-2 plan where a couple kids go 2 days and then a different group of children go 2 other days. The problem with that, it seems, that it's been very difficult for a lot of people with daycare. It's going to be difficult anyway with people with daycare, and that's not a factor that's taken lightly. I mean, that's a big part of this decision as we all look at this as well. But I think it's harder if you're only going to be, in class 2 days a week versus 5 in class, and then it could be 4 or 5 in class. We could pick one day that we decide to not be in class, but right now it looks like it's probably going to be 5 days in. So those are all multiple factors, but it's not necessarily the plan yet. There are some districts that have come out with some things. Many of them are districts that are picking one or the other. I know Kiski area, which is a pretty big school, about 3 weeks ago decided they're just going to go online for everybody, and K to 12. Schools in Virginia decided to do that. Some have decided you can come to school. We're not going to have busing. That's what they decided. I think that's very difficult. If you're somebody with a child and you don't have a car to get your kid to school, I mean, it's tough not to have a bus. So there's a lot of factors. Or some people are saying we're just going back full force and we're going to take, whatever chances. I'm not saying they're taking a chance, but they're going to just go back and just figure out what happens. Other questions, comments?
Dr. Matty, there are some questions in the chat. You may want to take a look
Okay,
at.
let me see. Thank you. Okay. Well, we got the question about the same family. We're going to try to talk to families and see what's best for them. I think it would work that, especially if you have sending the kids all at once is probably the best way to go. And that probably would be our first dividing factor with students. Josh, here's a question for you, Mr. Latour. Will any school district funding be negatively impacted by percentage of students who choose to stay home?
As of now, no, there hasn't been any information from the state that will happen. What they've told us so far is the 2020-2021 funding will be the same as this year, 1920, with no increase. But that is yet to be determined by the state.
Yeah. A couple other questions. Yeah, and that's something that you're permitted to do within this plan what you think's best for your area at the time. So they're not putting any restrictions saying, well, if 10% of your kids don't come, we don't give you 10% of your money. So, and I think one of the reasons is, to be honest, the feedback I've gotten from parents and or other people outside the district who have heard about our district is that we do a better job online than 99% of the cyber schools as well. So, if they can do it all the time, we can do it sometime. So that works. There's a question about kind of put these together. If you work, what do you do? Or if you don't have Wi-Fi during the week, we can go back to that. If you don't have Wi-Fi, by the way, that's one of my most disappointing aspects of the state of Pennsylvania. I think that's one of the things they could definitely do, would provide every student in Pennsylvania the access to Wi-Fi, kind of like you do with running water. I think that would be huge. If it comes to a point where someone does not have Wi-Fi, we could provide them with the proper text or things, and that would be easier because they could work on things and then bring that back with them the following week. So that would be a connection with the teacher that would be valuable. We have a lot of people on Wi-Fi. There are very few that are off, but we'll have to see when we get the new kindergartners and everyone. Another question is, would students be coming to special needs students come every day? That has not been thoroughly discussed yet, so I don't have an answer yet, and I apologize on that. That's an option that some people are looking at. As far as speech and those types of things, they could be taken care of when students come to school, but it could also be done a checkup online. Yeah, Erica, you sent that some districts are providing hotspots. We did that last year. I think we bought 10 or 12 hotspots and provided that to people. So we'll look at that if that's an option, again, to help people with hotspots and or other ways to get them online, because I do think that helps students. Then it's hard when both parents work. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, that's an honest answer. When both parents work, what do you do in the off week? I don't have that answer yet. So I'm just being honest with you. That's a tough answer because you want to go full force. And I think that's the biggest factor, K-4. At the beginning, I really looked at the possibility of going K-6 across the whole district all the time and spreading it out over both buildings. But we just don't have enough faculty that we could do that. You would need double the faculty that you have in order to space it out every day. So that's difficult for that particular plan, because I looked at that as a possibility to help parents with children that can't be there every day. Somebody else.
Dr. Matty, I had a question.
Yes,
So my daughter will be entering into kindergarten, so I don't know how last spring the elementary went. I know obviously at the high school we had kind of a 3-hour section that the students had class during a day. Would kindergarten, but the way that you kind of mentioned that they would be having all day school, would they be sitting at the computer starting at, say, whatever time, 8 o'clock, whatever time they start school, would that kindergartner or first grader, so would they be at school when they're on their off week is what I mean. So when they're on their off week, would they be at their computer all day long, or would it be a shortened schedule?
Yeah, I think it would probably be, look at the teacher, discuss that. I don't think it would be a shortened schedule for a kindergarten at home. And I think it would be the same for first and second, for example, as well, that you would look at a certain time of doing things that the teacher finds most needed. For example, beginning of the day, reading, math, that kind of thing. And then a kindergarten online all day is not practical. So obviously it would only be short segments, and or if the teacher provides, some other resource like a video, they could come on with a video that says, hey, these are things today to look at, and like kind of like when I was, most of you don't know Romper Room, I don't think. But, I watched that show for like 10 years and they never said my name. I just want to say that. At the end of the show, she would say, I see Abby, and I see, they never, Erica, but they never said Jeff. I never heard. But the point is, I think a kindergartner online for a brief amount of time is best. Yeah. You're welcome. Did anybody ever think of the air conditioning situation? Yeah, that's something that a lot of schools aren't thinking about. And then when I bring it up to them, they said, oh, I think we better think about that. And I don't even have any for heat, so I don't have that. This is Philip here.
Dr. Matty, this is Nancy Phillips.
Yes, ma'am.
And I did want to tell you, yes, I had thought about the air conditioning. Other school systems have had a challenge with that. And I think because we're blessed to have it, we don't sometimes think about how things can be transferred, including mold and other things. So I'm glad you thought about that.
Yeah, that's in general, it's difficult, but I know so many children too, not so many, but many children that have a problem with breathing issues that, concerns me when you're looking at that type of thing.
Well, I'm concerned for staff too. Of course, our students come first, but for staff too. So I'm thinking for whoever teamed up.
Right. Right. Because in elementary school, as opposed to higher levels, it's going to be easier to keep students in one particular area. You might just switch a teacher. You know, that's easier in this overall situation. Question, Mrs. Root? Anybody? Yes, ma'am, Erica. You don't have to raise your hand, Erica. I'm not the teacher.
I guess I'll piggyback onto that. When we did the meeting with Mr. Andresi, and he was talking about the teachers teaming, and that was the plan at the end of the school year in the elementary school. So I'm guessing then that is still going to be in place, and it's just those two teachers are going to move rooms, and the children will actually physically stay.
Yeah, if you look at the teaming aspect, that we say that's the best way to go for math and English, and it may be because of the factors involved, that a new curriculum plus just helping kids and the teachers able to focus on one area, they would just switch the teacher. Yeah, we wouldn't switch the kids, just switch the teacher. I think that's the most safest. Yeah, someone asked a question about live streaming classes. You know, you'll have to look at those regulations. It doesn't mean that we're showing students in class unless they're a group of students we know we could show. So live streaming is just like your regular classroom. So it doesn't mean that classes are recorded, by the way. It just means that we're doing the class. So you could have a teacher, for example, Abby, Mrs. Sarver, who teaches chemistry. She might record a section of her lesson when she does chemistry, showing this is the beginning of the day. I'm going to show this formula and this process in chemistry, and she records that. Teachers do that now. And then that just goes into the bank, and kids can look at that weren't able to attend, whether they were sick or at an event or some other reason. So partial of it could be recorded at the teacher's discretion in that sense. I hope everybody got coffee today. That was the main focus of this meeting.
I thought you were providing the coffee, Dr. Matty.
I sent it to your house, Mrs. Harris, specifically, but they wouldn't let the person in.
Oh, okay. Hey, you know, regarding busing, has it ever been considered, you know, the buses have such high seats, adding plexiglass?
Yeah, you know,
no?
Yeah, good question. They talk about that with the driver. But I think Josh can back me up on this. The state of Pennsylvania will not allow any alterations on a bus. They're worried about safety concerns. Now, other states are letting that happen. Other states are letting you do that. The state of Pennsylvania is worried that if you have an accident, people they're not allowing that. But that's a good question. We've asked that question. Yeah, that's a good question for everyone to consider.
Yeah, at this time, PennDOT does not allow for any mounting of any hand sanitizer stations or any kind of partitions, anything around the bus driver, anything like that.
Let me say this too. Two things we're looking at. One is how we deal with water fountains, and we probably would not have communal water fountains. Kids could carry water bottles and or fill their bottle up with like an electronic eye type thing. But the other one is, and this is a big thing, and I believe a couple of schools that I locally are doing this as well. I know the state of Ohio is. They're not permitting backpacks. So that's interesting. That's a whole nother discussion we have to have. Because I guess the issue there is kids leave their stuff, and they don't want them to leave their stuff there. But it's something we can talk about. You know, they could bring a backpack maybe and put in their area, but it's something that concerns some people. So I don't know. I haven't looked at that one. I do think at the high school level and the middle school level, the use of lockers will probably not happen. Don't ask me about a coat. I don't know that answer yet. I think the most difficult part of all this is there still is a lot of unanswered questions, but we're getting closer to setting a guideline that we can use and be flexible and be able to maneuver within the realm to help all students in all their situations the best we can. So that's what we're working on. How will indoor research work? I don't know. Indoor recess. I'd like outdoor recess with the same group of kids that are in the class. You may not use, or you may use certain materials. That's up for Mr. Jewell's going to be on that as the safety coordinator, and see if we could do that or not do that. But I wouldn't mind kids going on, at least running around a little bit. I think that was good. It has not gone by my thought process and talking to others. If we have a teacher that wants to take their class outside for a while and teach outside, I don't think that's crazy. So those are some interesting options.
Dr. Matty, I have a question regarding grading.
Grading, okay.
My son, we were given an email. Apparently, I must have gotten mixed in translation. I didn't see it in Mark. And my son's grades magically went from percentages to pass-fail in the elementary school. He was extremely upset about that. And he has realized that if that is the way that it's going to happen in the fall, his level of desire to strive for those percentages is not going to be the same as to strive for pass and fail. Now, I'm a teacher, so that's not going to be an option for him. But I'm worried about the grade pass fail, and I'm worried about the continuity of the rigor and education that's being provided via homeschooling with this remote learning.
Yeah, let me say that I think the issue, and that's a good question, Mrs. Kayas. The issue last year was that we were kind of put in a situation that within the third 9 weeks, or the end of the third 9 weeks, going into the fourth 9 weeks. So you had to make adjustments for all students. But going into this year, we will, we've talked about this. One of the plans, when you look at things, it's determined about the rigor of the situation. We've talked in high school, everything from having classes, cutting the classes down to a semester-based look, so students could have less classes to work on at one time. But as far as the grades will be the same as they were at the beginning of last year, the first 9 weeks. So there'll be percentage grades. Students will do the work and they'll earn their work and go from there. So that's what we will be doing. And it'll be an easier way to accomplish that now that we're prepared, whether we're at school or online, either way. So it'll be normal grading. Other questions? I do think one of the related to that, as someone who took a lot of online courses before in my lifetime, online courses can be extremely rigorous. Elementary is one thing, but at the high school level, middle school level, it can be extremely rigorous, and in some ways more difficult, depending on the subject, because of your ability to express. Now, having the live meets is like having the best of both worlds, having a live meet with a teacher, being able to ask questions, answer questions, see where the students are, adjust your curriculum needed, I think is positive. But then having them come in is also positive. So the interesting thing, there are schools in the United States that do a hybrid type of situation all the time. In other words, they have some kids come and then some kids not come. I mean, it's kind of interesting. And they come sometimes and sometimes they don't. So that's just, looking at some of those to try to get some ideas about what they do as well. Obviously, the social distancing is the biggest factor. And also, before we come out with a finalized plan, the biggest one is, what do you do when someone gets sick? In other words, the state, obviously, Mr. Parrish is here too. He understands that the state has some guidelines. You want to remove that person. You want to look at who they were in contact with. But we want to have better guidelines. For example, if a student in a certain grade is sick and they were exposed, obviously you're going to tell everybody, but all the students in that classroom are probably also going to need to be out of school for a period of time. If you're finding yourself with more cases in your county and in your school, then you would probably have to extend the time between kids going to school and not going to school. That is one of our options within all this, to make it more restrictive, but also provide that students still go to school. And that's a plan where you would have quite a 14-day period where a student would not attend school. But as Mrs. Rice had asked before, having kids go in and out is also an option, which I think is very beneficial.
Dr. Matty, I have an additional question.
Yes, ma'am.
You touched on it as well. You have no idea about if both parents in the home work.
Yeah.
If this is the option and it's the hybrid option of going 1 week on, 1 week off, if both parents work, will we have the ability or the option to maybe choose a different school within our area that is all within school time at all times? Or are
if you did that
in the realm of whatever Wilmington decides?
No, if you wanted to do that, it's you would have to pay tuition to that school district.
So that's the only addition. Like we are held to what you decide.
No, it's not held to what I decide. You as a parent decide for your child. I mean, so it's not just me either. I mean, I present this plan to the school board. We've had all types of people be involved in this, so we're giving an asynchronous option, a synchronous option, and also an option where you can go. We don't know if it'll be 2 weeks or we don't know it'll be 4 weeks. I think one of the with a hybrid situation. One of the difficulties with this is June, the week of June 20th, and we have no idea what's going to be like by August 20th. So I think that's another factor for us. And within these plans, you can also change things based on what's going on. So it's kind of a living document.
Correct.
So if you
when do you anticipate having a decision?
What's that?
When do you anticipate the board coming down with the final
decision?
Yeah,
we'll come out with the guidelines and everything in July here. And then
that's when the parents can plan on having this decision available?
In July. Yeah. Now within that decision, you'll have the flexibility if obviously when people write plans and they say, if we're in the red, if the county's in the red, we can't go to school. But a lot of that has to do with your own particular situation. For example, if you go to school and then you get 4 kids that are sick, you might be in the red for a while in your particular school as opposed to your county. So we'll have decisions in July. I don't think this is anything, and I appreciate everybody coming on here today, that anybody wants it rushed. I know everybody wants a decision right away. But one of the things with this, the landscape keeps changing briefly. So we have to expand the plan and be able to adjust it as we go.
Dr. Matty, with that, and I think Mrs. Kayazi, you had come in kind of later in the meeting. I think Dr. Matty said that there was possibly 3 options, so that if someone did work during the day, the student could do their work in the evening. Was that correct, Dr. Matty?
Yeah,
that was one of
this option that'll be available K to 12. Yeah.
And then could a parent ask or opt in to where their child didn't have off weeks? Would that be an option?
I don't know that yet because it depends on the number of people that would be. Because if you have social distancing, can you social distance? Now, it may be more feasible at the elementary level to have more kids, depending on what we do. But I think that's something that could be within the plan after you do a couple weeks. I think if you do a couple weeks of going back and then going into that process, you might be able to do that then. Other people may like that they're not there all the time. Other people may want to be there all the time. So I think that's a feasible option. I think that's one of the biggest factors, Abby, and I appreciate you asking that question. I don't think people realize is that I think when you get everybody together for a lengthy period of a week, that's going to be something you want to prepare for. It's not just something you want to just start that way. And in my experiences too, if you do get a case of this, and it might not be visible in students, but it may be later, who knows? It seems like it's changing every day. I don't know if we're getting enough data. This will travel pretty fast through people, as far as contagious. Now, that doesn't mean some people didn't have it already, but I don't know, does that mean that they don't have it? Does that mean that they get it back? we haven't got that information. Today, I've heard information that they're saying the antigens last for 2 months. And then are you more susceptible for the different strain? Who knows? But I think that flexibility is key.
Dr. Matty, I asked in the chat, I have a child who's coming into kindergarten, so obviously we did not get kindergarten screening since that was all canceled. Do you have a plan in place for this summer to do that?
I think Mr. Andreesi's looking at that and talking about how to screen that in the best way possible. We probably can do a little bit of that coming up in August to get a feel for each student. Probably, I think one way would be too, to ask questions to parents, online if that's convenient to the parent, in order to get more information about the student, because you know your child pretty well, so that would help. But he's working on that plan as I have a meeting with him right after this meeting, by the way, so I would definitely bring that up.
I know Mrs. Reiber at the very beginning of the whole pandemic had offered to sort of coach some of the teachers through some of the different programs that she uses as a cyber teacher, because there are so many things that are available. And I felt, and this could just have been my experience, that maybe some of the lower elementary teachers, because they don't work with technology as much, maybe didn't feel quite as comfortable using the technology. There are so many things out there. Mrs. Andrews, that probably doesn't apply to, because she was in 4th grade. She was more used to the technology. But I think a lot of the kindergarten and 1st grade teachers were sort of like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not sure what programs I can use. I know I want to do group work, but how do I do group work? So as a former teacher, I'm wondering what's in-service looking like for the summer? Are there going to be added in-services? Are we changing?
We've already, we've already started some of that before. Just an example is making sure people were more comfortable with Google, giving them more Google training if they want to get their Google certification, which helps them a little bit maneuver around the atmosphere. We're also looking at one of the areas that we talked about was moving 2 of the in-service days, or 1 in-service day, to the beginning. So instead of having 2 in-service days, you might have 3, or you might have 4, because this is such a big change. And the other thing is not just for online, obviously, for the social distancing. I don't think people realize what teachers are going to face in this atmosphere. And I think that's a big thing psychologically, and to do things the best way. So I think those are huge. But I think we can also get help, and we're always willing to look at things and see who can offer what. And I can talk to Mrs. Reiber about it as well, and some of our people.
Always available if you need any suggestions.
I think the good thing now is, people are more exposed and understand how to do some things at least. But now they're looking into, okay, I know how to do this. Now, how do I go to B? And I think that helps. And I think, they're asking other teachers, they're asking teachers in other districts, and that type of thing as well. I think that's one of the things that can be our advantage, and it can be helpful to 1st grade and 2nd grade as well. A good point. Let me see if there's anything else on the, what will cafeteria look like? Good question. I talked about this before at the beginning. Mr. Andreesi's looking at a plan to try to have kids spread out more, so the time of going to lunch would be definitely changed. So you would go to cafeteria and be spread out, and there's you could have a class in there or 2 classes that would be really spread out far, so it could be feasible in that respect. We did talk to the cafeteria, the food service, and we're looking at students getting their lunch, and it would already be kind of prepackaged in a sense, but also you could still have a choice or 2 in there. For an elementary student, you would have a hard tray that they could carry and or whatever, get help with that. So those are all things that would work. At this point, it doesn't seem like we would use a box lunch. We'll do the tray to make it easier, but there could, if there's a need to overlap, and somebody has eats in their room one day and then somebody else eats in their room another day, that might be an option. I think one of the things I've seen with the Wilmington teachers is a flexibility. They want kids to learn. They want kids, whatever way it is, whether it's here or at school or sometimes at school, they want that. And I think that would be a good way. I've also found through this experience that a good teacher is a good teacher, whether they're there or whether they're in China and they're teaching you from there. If Abby Sarver's in Colorado right now and she's teaching her class, she's going to do a good job. If Mrs. Andrews is in California, she's going to do a good job. Good teachers do a good job, whether it's online or in person. Bad teachers maybe do the same job, whether it's online or in person. So I think that's a factor. Pre-K, there's a question about pre-K. Pre-K would be follow the same things we do, in the sense that they would have to do 6 feet, and I will talk to their director about that particular area also. One of the big areas that's huge for all school districts is the dismissal and how we'll do that. Sometimes you have walkers also, and you notice we have a big walking celebration out front when people come to get their kids, and that's nothing wrong with that. It's a good way to talk. But we probably have to just separate people, have areas for them to stand and their child comes out. We're working through that about how we do dismissal, how we do early morning, Title I tutoring, which we have permitted in the mornings, which is still a viable possibility to do. So those are all options. Anything else by anybody or any comments?
Dr. Matty, there was Mr. Toscano had made a comment about if when students are in school, would they be required to wear a mask? And I know regulations and guidelines can change between now and then, but if we were to go back to school, say tomorrow, what do the guidelines say and where do you stand with that?
Personally, I guess it's my influence of living in Japan that I think all kids can learn to wear a mask because I've seen it. If I went today, I'd say that I would recommend it. However, I know it's not practical for a first grader and second grader to keep a mask on all day. I know how hard it is for me. Anybody that's around me knows that I can't sit for more than this hour that we're doing. So just to have a mask on. I do think, though, at the upper levels, you can look at wearing the mask when you transition, when you ride a bus, or when you transition to the next class in the hallways. That limits some of that. I would say that that's the golden question. In the survey, a lot of people said they don't think a mask is going to be, they don't look at that, but they did look at hand washing. Those types of things are very important. I would say if you err on the safe side, then I would say wear a mask. But I don't know if you can wear that at K1 to 2. I think that's very difficult. I think a fourth grader can learn to wear a mask. But there's, again, goes back to this teaching part, that I think is so vital. I think one of the areas is that, we have to teach how to deal with a pandemic. And I think we could teach kids how to wear a mask in different situations. I'm not really skirting the question. I don't really have a great answer right now. And that's if you look at the data, though, from what we're reading, the data is that it does help, especially inside. One of the things we passed was a sports plan. And we're also looking at a band plan as far as sectional band, like clarinets or things like that. One of the things that we've seen with that is that I'm having feedback, Mr. Kerr. How are you? One of the things that I'm seeing there is that they're outside, so it's less transmittable outside than it is inside. But even outside, people still wear masks. So that's the big debate. What do you think of that for children? I'm not saying for teachers, because teachers have to decide that as well. Do you see that as a feasibility? I'm not putting you on the spot, but if you have an answer, go ahead.
Me?
Yeah, sure, anybody.
No, I don't think you skirted around it. I understand that. And I think but I don't know. It's going to be hard for me to say for everybody, and I only speak for us, for my family. I think they can learn to wear it, but I think it will be, again, something that they've got to learn to get used to and to not touch. But again, that's typical. I feel what you do in kindergarten, first grade, you learn the rules of how to conduct yourself. But it's either way for me.
I got
Dr. Matt, can I
Yes,
chime
Mr.
in there a
Kerr.
little bit? I just wanted to say that there are other considerations in addition to the coronavirus about wearing the mask.
Sure.
And just, I want to make sure we consider the communication aspect of it. Kids with Asperger's or autism's already struggle to read. And also, you know, kids with hearing disabilities that rely on the facial expressions to communicate. And
No, I
so
totally agree.
there
One
are
of the
definitely
things-
drawbacks to it, is all I mean.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other thing a lot of people have talked about, I talked to one district and they're going to use shields as a way to help kids using a shield if they need to or want to, if they feel comfortable. Because you will have some students that their parents want them to wear a mask. You know, you're going to have different areas. So, Mr. Kerr, I appreciate your input there. I definitely think that's a factor in everything.
And how about teachers? Will teachers be wearing masks?
Well, we're going to talk to teachers about that first, and then we'll do that. But I think we will provide teachers with, we have masks and also face shields ready to go for teachers. So, for example, if you're an elementary teacher, you know, you could have a face shield on, which would protect you from someone at least spitting, and it's the shield. One of the interesting things, one of the superintendents was wearing a shield for length of time. He wanted to practice it. He said, you realize how much comes out of your mouth during the year or during the day when you have a shield on. Not to be, you know, but it shows you that that does transmit. So I think that I learned a long time ago about face masks, and I have the same reaction that some people, I had the same reaction that many people have. The misnomer with the face shield is that it protects you, not the face shield, the mask. When I went to Japan originally, I would walk around and I'm seeing Japanese people with a mask on. And my first inclination was, well, that guy, he's kind of, you know, he's kind of arrogant. He has a mask that, like, he thinks I'm going to give him something, right? I'm already self-conscious because I don't look like everybody else, right? So, but then that wasn't the case. They're wearing the mask so he wouldn't give me his cold. And that's the key, is that, you know, when you look at a mask as a way of not giving someone else the virus, is it now when you look at teachers, you know, are they more susceptible because they're older than a student? All the teachers are older than students. Then that's something you have to look at and see, you know, are students going to give that to? And that's one of the hard calls. I don't think it's very easy to do, but I do think it can be learned, and it may be a good thing to learn as we go along.
Can I jump in there on that point? Did you see the MSN article that came out that there has been no documented cases of a coronavirus being passed from a child to an adult?
Yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah, I hear.
Anywhere in the world.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's all kinds of information. And Mr. Kerr, I look at both ends of it, definitely. The thing is, though, my question is, that's not documented, as you said, but they also can't document to me how does air conditioning do something. So the fear I have of this is that when you go to hospitals, when you go to major clinics, they all wear masks. Now those are adults, and that could be people with the COVID, but that doesn't mean they do have the COVID. So it's very difficult. And I think these are all decisions. You try to be practical as you can. I don't think there's just a yes or no all the time. And I think that's huge in these decision-making processes. And that's why we wanted all of you to come on so we could hear some ideas. But does anybody else have anything else? I'm good till another 10 minutes if you do. Mrs. Rice.
I just actually had a question for the students. I know my daughter got a lot of from seeing all the social distancing and the school being shut down. So I was wondering if there was conversations on how to help the students understand why, especially the social distancing, will be at play at school.
You mean with teachers talking about it?
Yeah, like, you know, any type of mitigation, because I know it's going to be confusing. My daughter's in 6th grade, so I can't imagine the younger students understanding why they can't have a friend or their teacher.
I think it would be a discussion to have, and you're not going to necessarily stop everything, but you can teach students that, you know, sometimes we have to respect the space of others, and, you know, let's find a different way to high five. You know, I might just point to you, point to me. I saw in some countries they're using hula hoops as a way to, you sit inside the hula hoop when you're on the ground, and the hula hoop is my area, and then you're in your hula hoop. The other one, some countries put on for kindergarten students, I thought it was really cool, but I don't know how practical it is. They had like big hats that have like a noodle or whatever that is coming out. And, you know, you kind of make it a game, and then kids kind of find, you know, it's kind of cool. Don't let your noodle hit my noodle. You know, you're too close. You lose the game. You get a -1 on Mrs. Andrews' board if your noodle hits my noodle. So I think those are fun ways to build classroom team effort, and then also, you know, do those types of things that are really good to learn. So there's going to be things, and it doesn't mean we don't know if it's transmitted this way or this way, but they don't seem to know enough, because if they knew enough, they would tell me I could send every kid back to school without any problems. And when I get that, hopefully we learn that happens.
Dr. Matty, can I address this as well?
Certainly. I'm going to fill my coffee mug while you're doing that. Go ahead.
Awesome. Sounds good. Mrs. Rice, I just want you to know that I can't tell you that we have specifics set up yet for how we're going to address this, but there have been many conversations about the fact that we want to make sure that we are obviously keeping the children safe, keeping the staff safe, but at the same time, we do not want to keep the children safe in such a way that we create anxiety in them, because that is a very high possibility. So I want you to know that that is, like, first and foremost at the top of our concern here, is making sure that in all of these restrictions that are being put on us, we first and foremost want to make sure that we're not creating anxiety in the children. So I don't know if that completely answers your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, we are very aware. Okay.
And I figured you guys were. I just figured I'd bring it up because that, you know, it is something that I worry about, that they won't understand why these rules are, and it'll come off harsh.
Absolutely. I worry about that completely. I mean, these are my students, not my personal children, but I do worry about that as well. So, you know, I want everybody to know that that is something that, you know, we are definitely going to be aware of and working on. So,
thank you.
Yes.
I think.
Will a child need to stay home if they have a cough?
Go ahead.
Will a child need to stay home if they have a cough? So if someone has a cough, we don't know if it's allergies, we don't know if it's a cold, we don't know if it's COVID. Like, how long do they have to stay at home?
Yeah, I think one of the issues is that's going to be where we get the nurses involved, and I've talked to them. Some huge districts like Detroit Public Schools, they have a checklist for teachers, for example, when you check in. I think it's a good one. It just gets you thinking, you know, what's my temperature? Do I have a cough? Whatever. I think it's going to be suggested if someone is sick that they need to stay home. You know, if you have a cough, you have a cough. Just for everybody's health. And I do think it's going to be good to have parents check their child's temperature, you know, periodically before school, whatever. I think that's part of us working together. I think a huge area is that we work together and communicate the best we can once we're in school and or online and in school, because it's very easy to fall behind that. And I think parents might have a question, you know, maybe they call the nurse and say, you know, my child has a 99.9 or something. Should I send him? Or he has a slight cough. They may say, well, you know what, keep him home today and let's look at it tomorrow. I think it's better to be, I think that within this realm, until you learn more, you have to err on the side of caution as a parent. You know, and I think most parents will do that, but that's a good question. A child gets sick, we'll have a protocol for that to call the parent, isolate the child in a way, if they're sick in a way, fever, that type of thing. We're mandated by the state to provide that. So that's another area we'll have to address when we do it.
Dr. Matty, if a child is feeling maybe sick, but they're able to participate from home, do they need to notify the teacher that they would not be coming on that particular day, or would they be marked absent?
Yeah, I think you would just send an email and or, however the remind me text or whatever they're using, teachers to communicate with them and just tell them my child has a cough. They're just going to be at home today in group B, or, or they're not feeling, they're under the weather today. They got an allergy, The other thing is, I think when you tell a teacher, it's best to do it just in general terms. I wouldn't say necessarily frighten the teacher and say my child has a 100-degree thing and they've had the fever for 4 days and I didn't tell you. I think it's better to communicate with a nurse. And but definitely attendance is something the state has looked at that we should look at in some respects, helping those kids that are absent, and we will do every effort to make that feasible as long as there's an effort made by the children and also anyone like that.
Dr. Matty, one last question about the rigor involved. Yeah. That is a buzzword that I have, and I'm extremely appreciative to the level of attention that you're giving to the anxiety levels and to the safety and the health. The academic rigor, however, between 6th grade and 4th grade, my children had excellent teachers, but repeatedly they were told, well, you know what, don't worry about it. And they were in meetings where students were, and my students are high flyers, I will give that, but I'm also a special education teacher, so I understand both realms of the bell curve. My children were both told several times in meets, oh, you didn't hand it in, Johnny, don't worry about it. Yeah. Don't worry about it on both levels, both the pass-fail level and both the percentage grade level. I'm extremely worried now that my children are getting into the high school, middle school grade levels, that this is going to affect them later on in life.
Yeah. So
academically, I don't think the rigor is the same pre-COVID as it is now.
Well,
how is that being addressed?
Yeah, our plan is, our plan is to have the same.
And I understand, I am not saying that the teachers are doing anything differently. The teachers are excellent. I have no issues with any of the teachers.
I understand.
I'm just saying the rigor and the level was not the same pre-COVID as it was during.
Well, yeah, and as I said before, a lot of that is because we were thrown into it. Now that we've had time to plan, I think principals can set up ways of teachers having a level of rigor that is equal when the student is there and when the student isn't there. So that's definitely going to be addressed that way. I know a lot of classes were even more rigorous at the high school level, especially. So we'll do that by when teachers lesson plan. How do you present that material? How do you do that? And it comes down to, which it always comes down to, is how you assess students. So if you assess them in a way that creates an atmosphere that they learn how to, develop rigorous habits with getting not just busy work, but thoughtful work. I think that's an important part. And that's one of the things we're definitely, I'm in agreement with you. I don't want less rigor. You can know that about me. I'm not someone who doesn't want rigor. I want rigor. So I agree with you, Mr. Kayed.
Dr. Matty, may I address that quickly as a teacher?
Yes, sure.
Diana, I've had one of your kids, so I know exactly.
I wish you would have had both.
Okay. I know exactly where you're coming from, but let me just step in and just speak from the teacher's side of it. And, I know first grade is very different than, high school. Mrs. Sarver could speak to that a little bit more. But I know one of the challenges that we had very much in these last, 2.5 months is not only that we were thrown into this to try to figure out how are we going to teach these students, but also was that burden of always constantly wondering what is going on in the homes of our students. Have they had sick family members? Have they lost extended family members? Are their parents working? Are they figuring this out on their own? Do they have, supportive or non-supportive parents? Because I've had one of your sons and I know, that you would be a supportive household, that would be a different story with you. But it was a constant judgment call, at least on my part, to try to figure out what was going on in the homes of my students. So yes, there were many times when, I excused things that I would not have excused in the classroom because this was, I mean, I'm so tired of the word unprecedented, but it's true. This was an unprecedented time. We'd never experienced this. So rather than viewing it as a lack of rigor, I would say this was grace given to your children because everybody's worlds had been turned upside down, not only your children's, but yours and your husband's as well. So I would
correct. Yeah, and
anticipate-
I understand all that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, moving forward, had something changed? I mean, as a special educator, I saw all of that. Believe me, I have pages and pages of notes based on my own students' efforts and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But I mean, moving forward, now that we've had this, the differences between, I mean, it's going to be vast. So I know that, and I am in your shoes, Mrs. Andrews, and I am grateful for the teachers that my students have. But
I would anticipate
let me,
it to be different going forward.
I hate to cut you guys off. I'm getting near the end, but let me just say this, just related to that. I think one of the areas that has changed for teachers is to view, and not that they haven't, but it's more emphasized, is that learning is going to be much more personalized as we continue. So you're going to have students come in that are certain levels. You're going to have students that have read the whole time they're off and their parents are doing that. So we're going to have to personalize more learning in a way that challenges all students. But I think that's a good question. But let me just thank everybody for being here today. I hope you all got coffee. I saw a few coffee mugs. We were going to give an award to the best coffee mug, but we'll say that for next time. We will see if we're going to do this again, which is a possibility. But we're going to work on some of the areas that I discussed. Knowing more when we come up with the full plan, we're able to answer a lot of those questions. And I think even when you do pass a plan, you're still going to have questions. And it is going to be a living document that will be adjusted as needed. The school board will vote on that health plan. We post it on the website. But you may find out later that you changed that within a couple weeks or within 3 months. So we'll go from there. But if you have any other questions, you could send an email to me. If it's more specific, I would send that to your principal first. And then if they don't have an answer, they might get that to me. So if I can help you, I really enjoy everybody coming out and sharing their ideas and understanding. So we appreciate that. And I want everybody to stay healthy and have a good day. Thank you. Appreciate it.